You gave her a weekend. The law gives her the rest. The words hung in the air of the courtroom, heavy with finality. Damian Rourke, tech visionary and billionaire CEO, stood frozen as the judge's gavel came down with a crack that seemed to split his carefully constructed world in two. Across the aisle, Elise Hartman remained perfectly still, her face a mask of quiet dignity. She didn't smile. She didn't cry. She simply exhaled, a breath she had been holding for 8 long years. Between them sat a boy of 7, eyes downcast, unaware that this moment would forever alter the trajectory of 3 intertwined lives. This is the story of a woman who refused to shrink, a man who thought power could replace presence, and the child who brought them back into each other's orbit when the stars had long since moved on. It began, as many stories do, with a letter. For nearly 8 years, Elise Hartman had crafted a life of quiet intention in the coastal town of Sandpoint. The locals knew her as the art teacher who worked 2 jobs to make ends meet, who walked the shoreline at dawn, who raised a brilliant, thoughtful boy on her own. What they didn't know was the chapter she had sealed away, locked behind an ironclad NDA, and the kind of heartbreak that either destroys you or rebuilds you from the ground up. Elise had chosen rebuilding. Her small rented townhouse sat 3 blocks from the ocean, close enough to hear the waves on stormy nights. It wasn't grand, but it was theirs, hers and Rowan's. The walls were adorned with her son's artwork and photographs of their adventures together, hiking the coastal trails, building elaborate sandcastles, stargazing from their tiny backyard. "Mom, can we have pancakes?" Rowan called from the kitchen table where he sat surrounded by books. At 7, he already read at a high school level, his mind constantly hungry for information. "Coming right up, Professor," Elise replied, smiling as she mixed the batter. These Saturday mornings were sacred, no work, no distractions, just the 2 of them and whatever the day might bring. Rowan pushed his glasses up his nose, a gesture so familiar it made Elise's heart ache. It was one of the many small mannerisms he had inherited from his father, though he had no way of knowing this. The mail slot clicked, and envelopes scattered across the entryway floor. Bills, mostly. A flyer for the local farmer's market. And a thick cream-colored envelope with a return address that made Elise's hands go cold. Rourke Enterprises. She slipped it into her pocket without opening it. Whatever it contained could wait until Rowan was occupied with his Saturday art class. Some boundaries were worth preserving, even if just for a few more hours. "Mom. The pancakes are burning." Elise startled, turning back to the smoking pan. "Sorry, buddy. Got distracted. You okay?" Rowan's eyes, so perceptive, so like his father's, studied her face with concern beyond his years. "Just fine," she assured him, though the weight of the unopened letter seemed to burn through her pocket. "Just thinking about all the adventures we could have today." But as she served the slightly charred pancakes, Elise knew that whatever was in that envelope threatened the careful life she had constructed, the life before Damian Rourke had re-entered her consciousness. Before Damian, there had been dreams. Elise had graduated at the top of her class with a master's in architectural design, her thesis on sustainable urban spaces earning recognition from industry leaders. She had been idealistic, brilliant, and entirely unprepared for the machinery of power she walked into when she accepted a position at Rourke Innovations. If you're finding value in this story, please take a moment to subscribe to Mr. Ellington Love Lines. Each day, we bring you stories that touch the heart and remind us of what truly matters in life. Hit that subscribe button now and join our community. Damian Rourke had noticed her immediately, not just for her innovative designs, but for the quiet confidence with which she defended them. In a world of yes-men and sycophants, Elise Hartman stood her ground, even against the billionaire CEO whose name adorned the building. "Your environmental integration concept is flawed," he had told her during her first presentation. "With respect, Mr. Rourke, it's not," she had replied, calmly pulling up additional data to support her position. The room had gone silent, executives exchanging nervous glances. No one contradicted Damian Rourke. But instead of anger, a smile had played at the corner of his mouth. Convince me. And she had. That was the beginning. A professional respect that evolved into late-night discussions about design philosophy, about changing the urban landscape, about leaving a mark on the world. Somewhere between the blueprints and the coffee cups and the shared visions, something shifted. Damian wasn't like other men Elise had known. He was brilliant, driven, visionary, but also isolated by his success, walled off from genuine connection by the very empire he had built. When he looked at Elise, he saw someone who didn't want his power or his money, but who challenged his mind and matched his passion for innovation. "Have dinner with me," he had said one evening as they stood on the rooftop of a Rourke building, overlooking the city lights. "That would be inappropriate," Elise had replied, though her heart raced at the invitation. "I'm not asking as your boss. I'm asking as a man who can't stop thinking about you." She should have said no. She knew the complications, the power imbalance, the potential for professional disaster. But there was something in his eyes that night, a vulnerability beneath the confidence, a loneliness she recognized because she carried it too. So she said yes. For 6 months, they lived in a world of their own creation. Private dinners in penthouses overlooking the city. Weekend trips to remote locations where no one knew his name. Conversations that lasted until dawn about everything and nothing. Damian showed her a side of himself the public never saw, thoughtful, sometimes uncertain, capable of a tenderness that seemed at odds with his ruthless business reputation. But there were warning signs Elise chose to ignore. The way he compartmentalized her from the rest of his life. The careful management of when and where they could be seen together. The unspoken expectation that she would adapt to his schedule, his needs, his world. "I care about you," he would say, "but my life is complicated." Elise believed him because she wanted to, because the parts of him she saw in those private moments seemed worth the compromise. Until the day she realized that loving in fragments was slowly fracturing her own sense of self. It happened at a company gala, one of the rare public events he had asked her to attend. Not as his partner, but as part of the design team being recognized for an award-winning project. She had spent hours preparing, choosing a dress that was professional but elegant, rehearsing how she would navigate the complex social dynamics of being both his employee and his secret lover. But when she arrived, Damian barely acknowledged her. He was accompanied by a socialite whose family had connections his company needed, his hand resting casually on the small of her back in a gesture of intimacy Elise recognized all too well. Later, when she confronted him in a quiet corner of the venue, his response cut deeper than any deliberate cruelty could have. "This is business, Elise. You understand how this works. There are parts of my life that require certain appearances." "And which part am I?" she had asked, her voice steady despite the trembling in her hands. "The part you hide? The part that doesn't fit the appearance?" His silence was answer enough. That night, Elise made a decision that would alter the course of both their lives, though neither of them knew it yet. She would not be a secret chapter in someone else's story. She would not build her life in the margins of a man who offered fragments when she deserved wholeness. The next morning, she submitted her resignation and walked away from Rourke Innovations, from the career she had worked so hard to build, and from the man who had shown her that love without respect was just another form of power. What she didn't know, what she wouldn't discover until weeks later, was that she carried more than heartbreak when she left. She carried Rowan. Now, 8 years later, as Elise finally opened the cream-colored envelope from Rourke Enterprises, her hands trembled with a different kind of emotion. Not the lingering pain of what had been, but the fierce protectiveness of what now was, her life with Rowan, the stability she had built for them both, the peace she had fought to preserve. The letter was formal, impersonal, written in the cold language of corporate attorneys. A request for your presence to review a matter of personal significance to Mr. Rourke. A weekend of your time, fully compensated, with accommodations provided at the Meridian Hotel. Confidentiality is paramount. There was no mention of why, no hint that he knew about Rowan. Just a request, or perhaps a summons, wrapped in the polite veneer of legal language. Elise's first instinct was to refuse. To burn the letter and continue the life she had carefully constructed far from Damian's world. But as she watched Rowan through the window, sitting cross-legged in the garden with a book, she knew the time for simple solutions had passed. Her son was asking questions now. Questions about his father, about his history, about the parts of himself he couldn't see reflected in her. Questions she had always promised herself she would answer truthfully when the time came. Perhaps that time was now. One weekend. No more. She would hear what Damian had to say, establish whatever boundaries were necessary, and return to the life she had built. On her terms, not his. What Elise couldn't know was that the weekend would unravel everything, not just the careful distance she had maintained from her past, but the very foundations of Damian's carefully constructed world. If you've ever had to make a difficult decision that changed the course of your life, take a moment to like this video and share it with someone who might need encouragement today. Your story matters, and your choices shape not just your future, but the futures of those connected to you. The Meridian Hotel rose like a gleaming spire above the city skyline, its glass facade reflecting clouds and sky. Elise stood in the marble lobby, Rowan's hand firmly in hers, feeling distinctly out of place among the designer suits and quiet luxury. "Mom, is this where the important person lives?" Rowan asked, his voice hushed with awe as he took in the soaring ceilings and crystal chandeliers. "No, sweetheart. This is just where we're meeting him." Elise squeezed his hand reassuringly. She had explained to Rowan, in terms a 7-year-old could understand, that they were meeting someone from her past who wanted to talk about important grown-up things. She hadn't told him who Damian was, not yet. That revelation would depend entirely on how the weekend unfolded. A woman in a tailored suit approached them, her smile professional but warm. "Ms. Hartman. I'm Claire, Mr. Rourke's executive assistant. He's waiting for you in the penthouse suite. May I escort you up?" Elise nodded, her throat suddenly dry. This was real. After 8 years of silence, she was about to face Damian again, with their son standing between them, a living testament to what had been and what could have been. The elevator ride to the penthouse was silent save for Rowan's excited commentary about the digital floor display and the speed of their ascent. Elise focused on breathing, on centering herself, on remembering that she was no longer the young woman who had walked away broken-hearted. She was stronger now, defined by more than just the pain he had caused her. When the doors opened directly into the penthouse suite, Elise's breath caught. The space was exactly what she would have expected from Damian, minimalist, elegant, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a panoramic view of the city below. It spoke of power, of control, of a life lived above the ordinary concerns of the world. And there he was. Damian Rourke stood by the windows, his back to them, a silhouette against the bright afternoon sky. At the sound of the elevator, he turned, and Elise felt the years collapse between them. He looked older, of course. More distinguished. Silver threaded through the dark hair at his temples, and new lines marked the corners of his eyes. But the intensity remained. That focused gaze that had once made her feel like the only person in the world. His eyes moved from her face to Rowan, and Elise saw the exact moment recognition dawned. The slight widening of his eyes. The parting of his lips. The sudden stillness that seemed to overtake his entire body. He knew. Without a word, without an introduction, he knew. "Elise," he said, her name sounding strange and familiar all at once in his voice. "Thank you for coming." "You didn't give me much choice," she replied, keeping her tone neutral for Rowan's sake. Damian's gaze returned to the boy, taking in every detail, the shape of his face, the intelligence in his eyes, the way he stood slightly behind Elise, curious but cautious. "And this must be." He trailed off, the question implicit. "This is my son, Rowan," Elise said, emphasizing the possessive. "Rowan, this is Mr. Rourke. He's an old friend of mine." Rowan stepped forward, extending his hand with the politeness Elise had instilled in him. "Nice to meet you, Mr. Rourke." Damian seemed transfixed as he took the small hand in his own. "The pleasure is mine, Rowan. Truly." The air between the adults crackled with unspoken words, with questions and accusations and 8 years of silence. But Rowan, perceptive as always, broke the tension. "You have a really cool place. Can I see the rest of it?" A smile, genuine, unguarded, transformed Damian's face. "Of course. There's a media room down the hall that I think you might enjoy. It has every gaming system available." Rowan looked to Elise for permission, his excitement barely contained. "Go ahead," she said. "But stay where we can hear you, okay?" As Rowan disappeared down the hallway, the adults were left in a silence heavy with everything that remained unsaid. Damian began, then stopped, seeming to search for words adequate to the moment. "Yes," Elise confirmed, answering the question he couldn't quite formulate. "He's yours." Damian moved to the seating area, gesturing for Elise to join him. She chose a chair across from him rather than beside him on the sofa, a small but deliberate distance. "Why didn't you tell me?" he asked, his voice carefully controlled. "Would it have mattered?" Elise countered. "You made it very clear what I was to you, Damian. A convenient affection. A secret. Something that didn't fit into the public narrative of your life. That's not fair. Isn't it?" She met his gaze steadily. "You compartmentalized me then. Why would I believe you wouldn't do the same to our child?" Damian leaned forward, elbows on his knees, hands clasped as if in prayer. "I would never." "You already did," Elise interrupted. "To me. And I wasn't going to let you do it to him." The silence that followed was broken only by the distant sounds of Rowan exploring the media room, exclamations of delight filtering down the hallway. "How did you find out?" Elise finally asked. "About Rowan." Damian's expression shifted, something like shame crossing his features. "I didn't. Not until today." He gestured toward the windows, toward the city beyond. "I've been reevaluating things. My life. My choices. The company is changing direction, focusing more on sustainable development, the very thing you advocated for years ago." He paused, a rueful smile touching his lips. "I found myself thinking about you. About the vision you had that I was too short-sighted to fully embrace. I thought perhaps. I don't know. That we could talk. That I could offer you a position back at Rourke Innovations, leading the sustainability division." Elise stared at him, incredulous. "You asked me here for a job offer?" "I asked you here because I've spent 8 years regretting how things ended between us," Damian admitted, his voice low and intense. "The job was just an excuse. A way to see you again without having to admit how badly I handled everything." Before Elise could respond, Rowan's voice called from down the hall, "Mom. You have to see this. There's a whole room just for movies." "I'll be right there, sweetheart," she called back, then turned to Damian. "We need to establish some ground rules for this weekend. Rowan doesn't know who you are to him. Not yet. That's not something I'm willing to spring on him without preparation." Damian nodded slowly, his eyes never leaving her face. "I understand. But Elise. I want to know him. Now that I know he exists, I can't just." "You don't get to decide that unilaterally," she interrupted, her voice firm but quiet. "For 7 years, I've been the only parent he's known. Every decision, every crisis, every middle-of-the-night fever, that was me. You don't get to walk in now and claim rights you never earned." Pain flashed across Damian's features, but he didn't argue. "What do you propose, then?" "This weekend, you're my former colleague. Nothing more. I need time to process this, and Rowan deserves a thoughtful approach, not an impulsive revelation." Elise stood, smoothing her dress with hands that trembled slightly. After this weekend, if you're still interested in being part of his life, we can discuss legal parameters. Legal parameters, Damian repeated, the word sounding foreign on his tongue. Is that what it comes down to? Yes, Elise said simply. Because I don't trust your emotions, Damian. I trust contracts. I trust clearly defined boundaries. I learned that lesson the hard way. Before he could respond, she turned and walked toward the media room, composing herself with each step. This weekend would require every ounce of strength she possessed, to protect Rowan, to maintain boundaries with Damian, and to navigate the complex emotions resurfacing after years of careful burial. What she couldn't have anticipated was how quickly those boundaries would begin to blur, not through any manipulation on Damian's part, but through the natural curiosity of a 7-year-old boy meeting a man who shared his DNA. If you've ever had to navigate complex family dynamics or protect someone you love, you understand the courage it takes. Please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to Mr. Ellington Love Lines for more stories that explore the depths of human relationships and the strength it takes to rebuild after heartbreak. The weekend unfolded in a series of carefully choreographed interactions. Damian arranged a private tour of the city's science museum, watching with undisguised wonder as Rowan demonstrated knowledge far beyond his years. They dined at restaurants where the staff knew better than to make a fuss over the billionaire CEO in their midst. They walked through parks and along the waterfront, maintaining the fiction that this was simply a reunion between old colleagues. But with each passing hour, the resemblance between father and son became more apparent. Not just in their physical features, but in the way they approached the world. The same analytical mind. The same intense focus when something captured their interest. The same unexpected flashes of dry humor. On Saturday evening, as Rowan dozed on the sofa of the penthouse suite after an exhausting day of exploration, Damian and Elise found themselves alone on the balcony, the city lights spread before them like a carpet of stars. He's extraordinary, Damian said softly, his gaze fixed on the sleeping child visible through the glass doors. You've done an amazing job with him, Elise. He makes it easy, she replied. He's always been special. Thoughtful. Kind in a way that seems almost old-fashioned for a child his age. He gets that from you, Damian said. The kindness. The emotional intelligence. Elise smiled faintly. And the stubbornness? The way he won't let go of a problem until he's solved it. The tendency to forget to eat when he's absorbed in a book. Those are all you. A comfortable silence fell between them, the first since her arrival. For a moment, they were just two people sharing pride in a remarkable child, the complicated history between them temporarily set aside. I've made so many mistakes, Elise, Damian said finally, his voice barely audible above the distant city sounds. With you. With the company. With everything that matters. She studied his profile in the dim light, noting the weariness that hadn't been there 8 years ago. What happened? The Damian I knew was many things, but reflective wasn't one of them. He laughed without humor. Life has a way of forcing reflection, eventually. Success, it's hollow when there's no one to share it with. No one who sees you, really sees you, beyond the wealth and the power. You had that, Elise said quietly. You had someone who saw you. You chose differently. Damian turned to face her, his expression raw with regret. I know. And I've spent 8 years building an empire that feels meaningless compared to what I threw away. The honesty in his voice stirred something in Elise, not forgiveness, not yet, but perhaps the beginning of understanding. The man before her was not the same one who had compartmentalized her out of his life. This Damian seemed humbled by time, by success, by loneliness. It's late, she said, unwilling to explore these feelings further. I should get Rowan to bed. Damian nodded, respecting the boundaries she had drawn. Of course. Tomorrow is our last day. I thought perhaps we could visit the botanical gardens. Rowan mentioned an interest in ecosystems. That would be fine, Elise agreed, moving toward the door. But before she could step inside, Damian's voice stopped her. Elise, thank you. For this weekend. For letting me meet him, even if he doesn't know who I am yet. It's more than I deserve. She turned back, struck by the sincerity in his words. You're right. It is more than you deserve. But Rowan deserves to know where he comes from, when the time is right. This weekend isn't about you or me. It's about him. With that, she went inside to gather her sleeping son, leaving Damian alone with the weight of all he had missed and the hope of what might still be possible. Sunday dawned clear and bright, the final day of their arranged weekend stretching before them with both promise and finality. As they walked through the botanical gardens, Rowan raced ahead, captivated by the diversity of plant life and the intricate ecosystems created within the glass domes. He's going to be a scientist, Damian observed as they watched Rowan carefully examining a carnivorous plant display. That analytical mind, the way he connects concepts. Maybe, Elise agreed. Or an artist. Or both. He contains multitudes, that one. Damian glanced at her, a question in his eyes. Does he ever ask? About his father? Elise nodded slowly. More recently. As he gets older, he notices the differences between our family and others. He's starting to wonder about the parts of himself that don't come from me. What do you tell him? The truth, as much as is appropriate for his age. That his father is someone I knew when I was younger. That sometimes adults make complicated choices. That he is loved completely, regardless of who is or isn't in his life. Damian absorbed this, his expression thoughtful. And if, when he knows about me? What then? Elise stopped walking, turning to face him directly. That depends entirely on you, Damian. Are you prepared for what being a father actually means? Not just the fun weekends and the proud moments, but the mundane Tuesday nights helping with homework. The tantrums. The inconvenient school performances that conflict with board meetings. I want to try, he said simply. I know I have no right to ask for a place in his life after being absent for 7 years. But I'm asking anyway. Not for my sake, but for his. Before Elise could respond, Rowan came running back, eyes bright with excitement. Mom! Mr. Rourke. They have a whole room of orchids from places I've never even heard of. As he grabbed both their hands to pull them toward the orchid display, Elise felt the symbolism of the moment. Rowan literally connecting them, unaware of the deeper bonds that tied the three of them together. That evening, as they prepared to leave the penthouse suite for the last time, Rowan surprised them both by asking a question that cut through the careful narrative they had constructed. Mr. Rourke, how come you and my mom stopped being friends? You seem to like each other a lot. The adults exchanged a glance, a silent communication passing between them. It was Damian who answered, kneeling to meet Rowan at eye level. Sometimes, Rowan, adults make mistakes. I made a big one. I didn't treat your mom with the respect she deserved, and she was right to walk away. Rowan considered this with the seriousness only a child can bring to adult matters. But you're sorry now? Very sorry, Damian confirmed. More than I can say. Then maybe you can be friends again, Rowan suggested with the simple logic of childhood. Mom always says people deserve second chances if they're really sorry and try to do better. Elise felt her heart constrict at her son's words, her own wisdom reflected back at her in a context she had never anticipated. It's more complicated than that, buddy, she said gently. But I appreciate you caring about both of us. As they said their goodbyes in the lobby, Damian handed Elise a sealed envelope. My contact information. Personal numbers, not business ones. And he hesitated, a proposal for moving forward, if you're willing to consider it. Elise took the envelope, tucking it into her bag without opening it. I'll read it. That's all I can promise right now. Damian nodded, then knelt once more to say goodbye to Rowan. "It was an honor meeting you, Rowan. You're an extraordinary young man." Rowan, in a gesture that surprised both adults, stepped forward and hugged Damian. "Bye, Mr. Rourke. Thanks for the cool weekend." As Elise and Rowan walked away, Damian remained in the lobby, watching until they disappeared through the revolving doors. The weekend was over, but something new had begun, something none of them had anticipated when it started. Before we continue with this story of redemption and accountability, I want to invite you to join our community at Mr. Ellington Lovelines. If these stories of complex human relationships and emotional growth resonate with you, please subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell so you never miss a new story. Back in their small coastal town, life resumed its familiar rhythm. Elise returned to her teaching position and her weekend job at the local gallery. Rowan went back to school, full of stories about the big city and the nice man who had been his mom's friend. But something had shifted for Elise. The careful walls she had built around her past had been breached, and now she found herself facing questions she had long avoided. What did she want for Rowan's future? What role, if any, should Damian play in their lives? And how could she protect her son while also giving him the opportunity to know his father? A week after their return, when Rowan was in bed, Elise finally opened the envelope Damian had given her. Inside was not just contact information, but a comprehensive proposal. One that spoke to the businessman he was and the father he hoped to become. He offered financial support, of course, but with no strings attached. A trust for Rowan's education. Health insurance. A house in their coastal town, deeded in Elise's name, to provide the stability she had worked so hard to maintain. But more surprising were the personal commitments. Regular visits, scheduled around Rowan's activities, not Damian's business calendar. Video calls 3 times a week. A promise to attend school events, sports games, recitals, whatever activities Rowan pursued. And most unexpected of all, a request for Elise's guidance. "I don't know how to be a father," he had written. "But I want to learn. I'm asking for your help, not just your permission." The letter concluded with a simple statement: "I understand if you choose to handle this legally rather than personally. I will respect whatever boundaries you set. But I hope you'll consider allowing me to earn a place in Rowan's life, and perhaps, someday, your forgiveness." Elise set the letter down, emotions warring within her. The proposal was thoughtful, respectful of her position as Rowan's primary parent. It acknowledged the years of absence without making excuses. It offered support without attempting to buy forgiveness. But Elise had learned the hard way that Damian's words, however sincere in the moment, didn't always translate to consistent action. And this wasn't about her heart anymore, it was about Rowan's. After days of consideration, she made her decision. She would accept Damian's offer of involvement in Rowan's life, but on legally defined terms. Not because she didn't believe his intentions were genuine, but because some things were too important to leave to good intentions alone. She contacted a family law attorney specializing in high-profile custody arrangements. The process would be complex, potentially contentious, but necessary to establish clear boundaries and expectations. What Elise didn't anticipate was Damian's response to her decision. When she informed him via email that she would be pursuing legal channels to establish his paternity and define his parental rights and responsibilities, his reply was immediate and unexpected. "I understand and respect your decision. My attorneys will cooperate fully with yours. All I ask is that the process prioritize Rowan's well-being above all else, including my convenience or public image." The legal proceedings began quietly, with both parties hoping to keep the matter private for Rowan's sake. But in a world where Damian Rourke's every move was scrutinized, privacy proved impossible to maintain. The story broke on a Tuesday morning. Tech billionaire's secret child revealed in custody battle, the headline screamed, accompanied by paparazzi photos of Elise and Rowan walking to school. Elise's phone rang incessantly, reporters, talk shows, publishers offering book deals for her tell-all memoir. She disconnected it, focusing instead on protecting Rowan from the sudden intrusion of media attention. Damian's response was swift and uncharacteristic. Rather than the carefully crafted PR statement his team had prepared, he held an impromptu press conference outside Rourke Enterprises headquarters. "Yes, I have a son," he confirmed to the assembled reporters. "A remarkable 7-year-old boy who has been raised by his mother, Elise Hartman, with no support or involvement from me. This was not Ms. Hartman's choice, but mine, a failure of character and responsibility that I am now attempting to address." He continued, his voice steady but emotional, "I am not the victim here. I am not being trapped or extorted, as some outlets have suggested. I am simply facing the consequences of my choices and trying to do right by a child who deserves better than the father he's had so far." As video of the press conference went viral, public opinion began to shift. What had started as a salacious scandal was evolving into a story of accountability and potential redemption. But for Elise, the public narrative was irrelevant. What mattered was Rowan, who had finally learned the truth about Damian in the gentlest way she could manage, only to be thrust into a spotlight neither of them had sought. "So Mr. Rourke is actually my dad?" Rowan had asked, his expression thoughtful rather than upset. "Yes, sweetheart. I'm sorry you had to find out this way. I was waiting for the right time to tell you." Rowan had considered this information with the same careful analysis he applied to complex math problems. "Is that why we spent the weekend with him? So I could meet him without it being weird?" Elise nodded, amazed once again by her son's perceptiveness. "Yes. I wanted you to get to know him a little first, as a person. He seemed nice," Rowan said after a moment. "And he looks like me. Or I look like him, I guess." "You do," Elise agreed. "You have his eyes. And his mind." "But I have your heart," Rowan said with certainty. "That's what matters most, right?" Elise had pulled him close then, overwhelmed by love for this child who somehow always found the truth at the center of adult complications. As the legal proceedings continued, what had begun as a potential battle evolved into a negotiation. Damian, contrary to his reputation as a ruthless businessman, conceded to nearly all of Elise's terms. He seemed genuinely more concerned with establishing a relationship with Rowan than with asserting control or minimizing his financial obligations. The case culminated in a closed-door hearing before family court judge Marianne Criss, known for her no-nonsense approach to high-profile custody cases. Both Elise and Damian testified, laying out their perspectives and proposals for Rowan's future. Elise spoke of the stable life she had built, of her concerns about disruption, of her willingness to facilitate a relationship between father and son while maintaining the security Rowan had always known. Damian spoke of his regret, his desire to be present going forward, his commitment to earning a place in his son's life through consistency and respect for the family structure Elise had established. Judge Criss listened to both, her expression revealing nothing. When they had finished, she addressed them directly. "Mr. Rourke, you've built an empire valued at billions. You've transformed industries and been hailed as a visionary. But in this courtroom, none of that matters." Her gaze was steady, unflinching. "Here, you are simply a father who has been absent for 7 years of his child's life." Damian nodded, accepting the assessment without defense. "Ms. Hartman," the judge continued, turning to Elise, "you've raised an exceptional child under difficult circumstances, creating stability and security with limited resources. Your commitment to your son's well-being is evident in every decision you've made." Judge Criss closed the file before her, folding her hands atop it. "This court's primary concern is the best interest of the child. Not the convenience of the parents, not the public perception of either party, and certainly not the financial implications of any ruling." She paused, looking between them. "Mr. Rourke, you gave Ms. Hartman a weekend, a brief moment of your time after years of absence. The law gives her considerably more." The courtroom fell silent as Judge Criss delivered her ruling. Primary physical custody will remain with Ms. Hartman, with Mr. Rourke granted visitation rights that will increase gradually over the next year, contingent upon consistency and compliance with all other aspects of this ruling. Regarding the child's surname, the court grants Ms. Hartman sole discretion to determine if and when Rowan will carry the Rourke name. This is not a right, Mr. Rourke, but a privilege to be earned through demonstrated commitment to your son's well-being. The property Mr. Rourke has offered in the coastal community will be transferred to Ms. Hartman's name immediately, with no conditions or reversionary clauses. This is not compensation, but recognition of the stability Ms. Hartman has provided and must continue to provide. Finally, Mr. Rourke will participate in structured Monday morning parenting time each week, requiring adjustment of his professional schedule rather than the child's routine. This court believes that true commitment is demonstrated not when convenient, but when challenging. Judge Chris looked directly at Damian. You gave her a weekend. The law gives her the rest. The question now, Mr. Rourke, is what you will give your son going forward, not in financial support, which is ordered separately, but in genuine presence and participation in his life. With a crack of her gavel, the hearing concluded, leaving both parties to absorb the implications of her ruling. Outside the courthouse, reporters waited, cameras ready to capture the aftermath of what had become a high-profile case despite attempts at privacy. Elise emerged first, declining to comment as she made her way through the crowd. Moments later, Damian appeared, surrounded by his legal team. But rather than hurrying to the waiting car as expected, he stopped, facing the assembled media. I have a brief statement, he said, his voice carrying across the courthouse steps. Today, Judge Chris made a ruling that prioritizes my son's well-being and stability. I fully support her decision and am grateful for the opportunity to be part of Rowan's life on terms that respect the extraordinary job his mother has done raising him. A reporter called out, Mr. Rourke, are you disappointed about not receiving joint custody? Damian shook his head. I haven't earned joint custody. I haven't been present for 7 years of my son's life. What I've been granted is the chance to prove, through consistent action rather than promises or financial support, that I can be the father he deserves. Another voice from the crowd, will this affect your role as CEO of Rourke Enterprises? Yes, Damian replied without hesitation. My schedule will adapt to accommodate my responsibilities as a father, not the other way around. If that impacts the company, then the company will need to evolve. As the questions continued, Elise watched from her car parked down the street, struck by the transformation in the man she had once known. The Damian Rourke addressing the media was not the calculating businessman who had compartmentalized her out of his life 8 years ago. This was someone humbled by consequence, someone prioritizing relationship over image, someone beginning to understand what truly mattered. It was a start. Not forgiveness, not reconciliation, but a beginning. If you've ever had to rebuild trust or navigate complex family dynamics, you know it's a journey that requires patience and consistent effort. Please take a moment to like this video and share it with someone who might be facing similar challenges. Your support helps stories like these reach those who need them most. The months following the court ruling brought changes both practical and profound. Elise and Rowan moved into the house Damian had provided. A comfortable craftsman-style home 3 blocks closer to the ocean than their rented townhouse, with a dedicated space for Rowan's growing collection of science equipment and a studio where Elise could pursue her long-neglected passion for architectural design. True to his word, Damian appeared every Monday morning at 7:30 a.m., regardless of business demands or travel schedules. Sometimes this meant video calls from hotel rooms across the world, but more often, it meant his physical presence, helping Rowan prepare for school, reviewing homework, establishing a routine that gradually became familiar and expected. The first few visits were awkward, the relationship between father and son tentative and uncertain. But as weeks turned to months, something began to shift. Rowan's initial caution gave way to curiosity, then to a cautious affection for this man who shared his features and his way of thinking. For Damian, each Monday brought new revelations about the son he was just beginning to know, Rowan's fascination with marine biology, his talent for chess, his quiet compassion for classmates who struggled socially. He absorbed these details with the same intensity he once reserved for market analyses and product development, building a mental catalog of his son's world. Elise observed this evolution with cautious optimism. She had expected Damian's interest to wane once the novelty wore off or when business pressures mounted. But month after month, he remained consistent, rearranging board meetings, delegating presentations, and once even landing at the local airport at 5 a.m. after an overnight flight from Tokyo, all to ensure he never missed a Monday morning with Rowan. "You seem surprised," Damian commented one afternoon as they watched Rowan at his first swim meet. They had developed a careful cordiality, their interactions centered entirely around their son. "I am," Elise admitted. "The Damian I knew wouldn't have rescheduled a meeting with Japanese investors for a 7-year-old swim meet." "The Damian you knew was a fool," he replied simply. "A fool who thought success was measured in acquisitions and market share rather than moments like this." As Rowan completed his race and looked immediately to the stands where both his parents sat, his face lighting up at their presence, Elise felt something shift inside her. Not forgiveness exactly, but perhaps the beginning of a new understanding. 6 months after the court ruling, Damian's visitation rights expanded to include alternate weekends. The first time Rowan stayed at the apartment Damian had purchased in their coastal town, a modest 3-bedroom that had surprised Elise with its lack of ostentation, both father and son had been nervous. "What if he doesn't like the room I set up?" Damian had asked Elise, uncharacteristic uncertainty in his voice. "What if he gets homesick?" "Then you'll handle it," Elise had replied. "That's what parents do. We figure it out as we go." The weekend had been a success, establishing a new rhythm to their evolving family structure. Rowan returned home full of stories about the telescope Damian had set up on the balcony, the tide pools they had explored, the conversations that had stretched late into the night. "Dad knows a lot about stars," Rowan reported, the word "dad" still new on his tongue but becoming more natural with each use. "And he said next time we could build a model of the solar system that actually shows the right distances between planets, not like the ones in books that get it all wrong." Elise had noted that next time, with a mixture of emotions. Gratitude for Rowan's growing relationship with his father, lingering wariness born of past disappointment, and something else she wasn't quite ready to name. As the 1-year mark of Judge Chris's ruling approached, another shift occurred, this one in Elise herself. The art classes she had once taught to supplement her income became a source of genuine fulfillment. The architectural sketches she drew in quiet evenings evolved into actual designs. With financial stability no longer a constant concern, she found herself reconnecting with the creative passion that had once defined her professional identity. Damian noticed the change during one of their handoffs after Rowan's weekend visit. "You seem different," he observed as they sat on a park bench, watching Rowan feed ducks at the pond. "More like the Elise I first met." She considered this. "I suppose I am. I've started designing again. Small projects, local renovations. Nothing like what I was doing at Rourke Innovations, but it feels good to create again." "You were brilliant," Damian said quietly. "Your sustainable urban housing concept was years ahead of its time. The company implemented most of it after you left, though I doubt anyone gave you proper credit." Elise looked at him in surprise. "You used my designs." "They were the best solutions we had," he said simply. "The fact that you were gone didn't change that." A week later, a package arrived at Elise's home, a portfolio containing all her original designs from her time at Rourke Innovations, along with documentation of how they had been implemented in projects worldwide. Attached was a note in Damian's handwriting, "Credit where credit is due. These changed the direction of the company. You should know the impact your work has had." The gesture touched Elise more deeply than she had expected. It wasn't about the recognition, though that mattered. It was about acknowledgement, of her contribution, of her value beyond their personal history, of the professional respect that had been the foundation of their relationship before everything else complicated it. That evening, after Rowan was asleep, Elise called Damian for the first time since the court proceedings began. "Thank you for the portfolio," she said when he answered. "You didn't have to do that." "Yes, I did," he replied. "It was long overdue." A pause stretched between them, comfortable in a way their silences hadn't been in years. "Elise," Damian said finally, "I know our relationship is defined by co-parenting now, and I respect those boundaries. But I want you to know that I see you, not just as Rowan's mother, but as the brilliant, principled woman you've always been. The woman I should have valued properly the first time." The words hung in the air, not quite an overture, not quite an apology, but something honest that required no response. "Good night, Damian," Elise said softly, ending the call before emotion could complicate what had been a moment of simple truth between them. Before we continue with this story of redemption and growth, I want to remind you to subscribe to Mr. Ellington Love Lines if you haven't already. Your support allows us to continue bringing you stories that explore the complexities of human relationships and the courage it takes to rebuild after heartbreak. On the one-year anniversary of Judge Chris's ruling, Elise made a decision she had been contemplating for months. After Rowan's Monday morning time with Damian, she asked her ex to stay for a conversation after their son left for school. "I've been thinking about Rowan's last name," she began as they sat at her kitchen table, the remains of breakfast between them. "He's been asking about it more frequently. I think he's ready, if you are." Damian looked up sharply, surprise evident in his expression. "You want him to take my name?" "I want him to have the option," Elise clarified. "Judge Chris gave me discretion in this matter, and I've been watching you this past year. You've been consistent. Present. You've adjusted your life around Rowan's needs rather than expecting him to accommodate your schedule." She took a deep breath. "You've earned this, Damian. You've shown that you're committed to being his father not just in name, but in action." Emotion flickered across Damian's face, gratitude, validation, a complex mix of feelings he didn't try to hide. "Thank you," he said simply. "That means more than you know." "I was thinking Rowan Rourke," Elise continued. "A hyphenate that honors both his histories." Damian nodded. "It's perfect. And entirely your decision to make." "There's something else," Elise said, her tone shifting slightly. "I've been offered a position with Coastal Sustainable Development. They're working on affordable, environmentally conscious housing projects up and down the West Coast. It would mean more travel than I'm used to, but the work is meaningful and aligned with what I've always wanted to do." "That's wonderful," Damian said with genuine enthusiasm. "They'd be lucky to have you." "It would also mean adjusting our current arrangement," Elise continued. "There would be times when I'd need to be away for a few days at a stretch. I was hoping we could discuss expanding your parenting time to accommodate that." Damian's response was immediate and unhesitating. "Of course. Whatever you need. My schedule is flexible now. I've restructured the executive team specifically to allow for more time with Rowan." Elise studied him, noting the changes a year had wrought. The driven CEO was still there, but tempered now by something deeper, a sense of purpose beyond business success, a recognition of what truly mattered. "You've changed," she observed. "I had to," he replied simply. "The alternative was missing out on the most important relationship in my life." The words hung between them, their meaning extending beyond his relationship with Rowan to encompass something larger, a recognition of what had been lost and what, perhaps, could still be rebuilt. 2 years after Judge Chris's ruling, life had settled into a new normal. Rowan Rourke, now 9, thrived in the stability of his expanded family structure. Elise's work with Coastal Sustainable Development had evolved into a leadership position, her innovative designs for affordable, eco-friendly housing gaining recognition throughout the industry. Damian had restructured Rourke Enterprises, delegating day-to-day operations to focus on strategic vision and, more importantly, to create space for his role as a father. The relationship between Elise and Damian had evolved as well, moving from cautious co-parents to something approaching friendship. They celebrated Rowan's achievements together, consulted each other on parenting decisions, and occasionally, when the moment called for it, shared memories of the past without the weight of recrimination. On a warm summer evening, as they sat on the deck of Elise's home watching Rowan demonstrate his latest science experiment to neighborhood friends, Damian turned to her with an expression she hadn't seen in years, open, unguarded, without the careful calculation that had once defined him. "Do you ever think about us?" he asked quietly. "What might have been if I hadn't been such a fool?" Elise considered the question, her gaze on their son rather than the man beside her. "Sometimes," she admitted. "But then I look at where we are now, and I wonder if we needed to take this particular path to get here. Here being a place where we both know what matters. Where we've built something sustainable, not just for Rowan, but for ourselves." Damian nodded, understanding the architectural metaphor that had always been their shared language. "I'd like to think I would have figured it out eventually, even without losing you. But the evidence suggests otherwise." Elise turned to him then, really looking at the man he had become. "The past is written, Damian. What matters is what we build from here." "And what are we building, Elise?" he asked, the question layered with meaning beyond co-parenting arrangements or legal agreements. Before she could answer, Rowan called them over, eager to show them the results of his experiment. The moment passed, but something had shifted between them, a door opening to possibilities neither had allowed themselves to consider until now. 3 years after Judge Chris's ruling, on a Monday morning that had long since become sacred in their family calendar, Damian arrived at Elise's home to find not just Rowan waiting, but Elise as well, dressed for the office but clearly intending to join their usual breakfast routine. "Is everything okay?" he asked, concern immediate in his voice. "Everything's fine," she assured him. "I just thought, maybe it's time for Monday mornings to be about all of us, not just you and Rowan." The significance of the gesture wasn't lost on Damian. Monday mornings had been mandated by the court, a structured time designed to ensure his consistent presence in Rowan's life. For Elise to voluntarily join this time, to expand their court-ordered arrangement into something chosen rather than imposed, represented a profound shift. As they sat together at the breakfast table, Rowan chattering about his upcoming science fair project, Damian caught Elise's eye over their son's head. The look that passed between them contained years of history, pain and growth, loss and recovery, and perhaps, just perhaps, the foundation for something new. "So," Damian said as they cleared the breakfast dishes together while Rowan gathered his school materials, "Monday mornings as a family now?" Elise nodded, a small smile playing at the corners of her mouth. "I think we've earned it, don't you? 3 years of consistency, of putting Rowan first, of building something that works." "We have," Damian agreed, his voice quiet with significance. "But I sense there's more to this decision." Elise paused, her hands stilling on the plate she was rinsing. "There is. I've been thinking a lot about forgiveness lately. Not just forgiving you, but forgiving myself for the walls I built after I left. They were necessary then, for protection, for healing. But I'm not sure they serve any of us anymore." Damian leaned against the counter, giving her the space to continue. "The truth is," Elise said, meeting his gaze directly, "I'm proud of who you've become. The father you are to Rowan. The man who shows up consistently, who prioritizes his son over business empires, who has earned every bit of the relationship you now have with him. That means more coming from you than anyone," Damian replied, emotion evident in his voice. "You set the standard I've been trying to live up to." "And you have," Elise acknowledged. "Which makes me wonder if perhaps it's time to consider what else might be possible between us." The words hung in the air between them, weighted with possibility. Before Damian could respond, Rowan burst back into the kitchen, backpack slung over one shoulder. "Ready for school," he announced. "Dad, are you still coming to my science fair presentation on Thursday?" "Wouldn't miss it for anything," Damian assured him, the transition from profound adult conversation to parental responsibility seamless after years of practice. As they walked Rowan to the bus stop together, A family unit in the eyes of neighbors who had watched their story unfold over the years, Elise felt a sense of rightness that had been absent for too long. Not the breathless romance of their early days, but something more substantial. A foundation built on respect, on shared purpose, on the daily choice to prioritize what mattered most. When Rowan's bus pulled away, they stood together on the sidewalk, the morning stretching before them with new possibility. "Would you like to get coffee?" Damian asked, the simple invitation carrying layers of meaning. "I don't have any meetings until noon." "I'd like that," Elise replied. "I think we have a lot to talk about." They walked to a small cafe by the water, claiming a table on the patio overlooking the ocean. For a while, they sat in comfortable silence, watching the waves and seagulls, existing together in a moment uncomplicated by past or future. "I never stopped loving you," Damian said finally, his voice steady despite the weight of the admission. "Even when I convinced myself that success was more important, that the company needed my undivided attention, that relationships were secondary to achievement, even then, I knew what I had lost when you walked away." Elise considered his words, not rushing to respond. "Love was never our problem, Damian. It was priorities. It was showing up. It was making space in your life for someone else's needs and dreams." "I know that now," he acknowledged. "It took losing you, finding out about Rowan, facing a judge who saw through every privilege I'd hidden behind. It took all of that for me to understand what actually matters." "And what does matter?" Elise asked, though she suspected she knew the answer. "Family," Damian said simply. "Not as an accessory to a successful life, but as the very definition of success itself. Being present for the people you love. Building something that lasts beyond quarterly reports or market valuations." He reached across the table, his hand stopping just short of hers, an invitation, not a presumption. "I'm not asking for anything, Elise. You've given me more than I deserve already by allowing me to be part of Rowan's life. But if there's any chance, any possibility that we could explore what a relationship might look like now, as the people we've become, not the people we were, I would like to try." Elise looked at his outstretched hand, then at the man before her. So different from the driven, emotionally unavailable CEO she had left 11 years ago. This Damian had been humbled by consequence, transformed by fatherhood, rebuilt through the daily choice to prioritize relationship over achievement. Slowly, deliberately, she placed her hand in his. "I think," she said with a smile that held both caution and hope, "that Monday mornings might be just the beginning." If you've ever experienced the power of forgiveness or witnessed how people can truly change when given the right motivation, please take a moment to like this video and share it with others who might need this message of hope and redemption. Your support helps stories like these reach those who need them most. 5 years after Judge Chris's ruling, the coastal community that had once whispered about Elise Hartman's mysterious past now knew her as part of one of the most respected families in town. Elise Rourke had become a leading voice in sustainable architecture, dividing her time between local projects and consulting work that took her up and down the coast. Damian Rourke had restructured his company to operate primarily from a regional office, allowing him to be present for family dinners, school events, and the daily rhythms of life with Rowan, now 12 and showing signs of both his parents' brilliance. Their journey back to each other had been deliberate, measured, a careful reconstruction rather than a passionate reunion. They dated for a year, relearning each other as the people they had become, before Damian proposed on a Monday morning over breakfast, with Rowan as an enthusiastic co-conspirator in the planning. Their wedding had been small, intimate, held on the beach with Judge Chris as an honored guest. "I've presided over thousands of cases," she had told them during the reception, "but rarely have I seen a ruling lead to such profound transformation. You've built something remarkable here. Not just a family, but a testament to what's possible when accountability meets forgiveness." Now, as they prepared for another Monday morning, no longer court-mandated but still sacred in their family calendar, Elise watched Damian and Rowan hunched over a complex robotics project at the kitchen table. The sight still filled her with a quiet wonder, this family they had built, not from obligation or convenience, but from choice and commitment and daily presence. "Mom, come look at this," Rowan called, excitement evident in his voice. Dad figured out why the servo motor kept failing. "It's going to work now." As she joined them at the table, Damian's hand found hers beneath it, a small gesture of connection that had become as natural as breathing. They had learned, over these 5 years, to balance independence with togetherness, to honor each other's work while prioritizing their family, to build a relationship that served as a model for Rowan of what partnership could be. "I was thinking," Damian said later that evening as they walked along the shore, a ritual they had established early in their renewed relationship, about Judge Chris's ruling all those years ago. "What about it?" Elise asked, her hand comfortable in his. "She said I gave you a weekend, but the law gave you the rest, the name, the house, the Monday mornings." He stopped walking, turning to face her in the golden light of sunset. "But the truth is, you gave me everything. A second chance I didn't deserve. The opportunity to know our son. The possibility of rebuilding what I destroyed." Elise smiled, reaching up to touch his face, a face now as familiar and beloved in its maturity as it had been in youth. "We gave each other a second chance. And we built something better than what we lost." "We did," Damian agreed, drawing her close. "Something sustainable." The architectural metaphor made her laugh, their shared language, their professional shorthand that had evolved into a personal one. "Very sustainable," she agreed. "Built on a proper foundation this time." As they continued their walk, the setting sun casting long shadows across the sand, Elise reflected on the journey that had brought them here. From a brilliant young architect and an ambitious CEO, to single mother and absent father, to co-parents navigating court orders, to partners rebuilding trust one Monday morning at a time. The path hadn't been straight or simple. It had required legal boundaries, judicial intervention, public scrutiny, and private reckonings. But standing here now, with the family they had created through intention rather than convenience, Elise knew that every difficult step had been necessary. Not just for Rowan's sake, but for their own growth into the people they were meant to become. The billionaire CEO had given her a weekend. The judge had given her a name, a house, and Monday mornings. But time and transformation had given them all something far more valuable, a family built on accountability, forgiveness, and the daily choice to show up for one another, not when convenient, but when it mattered most. And that, Elise reflected as they turned toward home where Rowan waited, was worth more than any empire, any court ruling, any material possession. It was, quite simply, everything. Thank you for joining us for this story on Mr. Ellington Love Lines. If you found value in this tale of redemption, accountability, and second chances, please take a moment to like, subscribe, and share with someone who might need to hear this message today. Until next time, remember that it's never too late to rebuild what truly matters.